Hello hearties, so today is my last working day in Australia before I fly back to the UK, and I thought I'd make the most of this lovely outdoor working space to record a final video for you before I go. But by the time you receive this, or by the time you watch it, I will be very much settled back into my regular life in London. So what I've decided to talk about today is I've decided to share with you some of the things that I did wrong in the early days and the early years in business. And the reason I've decided to do this is because the thing is, we all start off just not knowing what we don't know in business. I know for me, when I look back at those early days, it's almost as though I was operating from within a thick bank or thick wall of fog where I couldn't see in front of my nose, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And so it was really hard for me to make the right decisions to take my business forward. And because of that, I did a lot of things that I now know to have been mistakes that set me back considerably, compared to if I had, known what I know now. And the reason I want to share this with you is because if things aren't quite working for you the way you hoped, it doesn't mean that you're stupid, it doesn't mean that you're a failure, and it definitely doesn't mean that you are not cut out to be in business. It just means that you're starting in the same place I started, not knowing what you don't know. So I thought for a bit of fun I would share with you some of those things that I did wrong, just to reassure you that you're not alone. It's not just you, it was me too. It's probably all of us when we're starting off on this business journey. So the first mistake that I made, my first big mistake, was selling my tools and techniques instead of selling the end result that I could give somebody. And so how this looked was I would go networking. This is in my first year of business, and I had business cards printed and I called myself a transformational coach. And then there was an evolution in that, and before that year was out, I'd moved on and I now had business cards and I called myself a business coach. Now, of course, I still attracted a certain number of clients, probably because of a combination of meeting people personally, face-to-face at networking, who bought into me as an individual, as a personality, which is why it can often be easier for us to attract clients in the real world rather than online to begin with. But also because I was confident about sales. I knew how to guide somebody through a sales process. I knew how to confidently have a sales conversation. But what I didn't understand at that time was how important it is to be able to solve people's problems through my work. So I was selling my tools. I was very proud of the fact that I qualified as a coach, and I was selling my coaching tools instead of selling my clients what they really wanted, which was a solution to their biggest problem. And so I wasn't positioning myself or my services as offering a solution to a problem that somebody was struggling with, where there would be a high motivation for them to invest in working with me. I was just selling my tool and technique of coaching like every other coach out there. So, it was harder to compete. And it was only when it was about a year into my business when I finally started to specialize in teaching heart-centered business owners how to get clients while still remaining authentic and comfortable and true to their values. And that was when things really started to take off for me. So it was a whole year that I spent sort of bouncing around, getting the occasional client, but not really understanding why I wasn't getting any more traction than that. So some of you might relate to that. Another thing I did wrong was I ran low-priced workshops without an upsell. So again, this was my first, I'd say this was my sort of my midway through my first year, probably the first half of my second year actually, first half of my second year in business, where I had already started to specialise, so I was now attracting interest in my work. But the way that I was delivering on that work was through one-day workshops. I charged £47 per person for the workshops. I filled those workshops by partnering up with what I now understand was a joint venture partner, and we would split the profits. And so I was left really confused by, how is it I'm doing all this work, but after we've paid for the venue and we've split the profits, I'm not making more than a few £100s. And this just wasn't a viable business model. And this is because I did not know what I know now, which is that I needed to either price that workshop at a level where it would be profitable in its own right, which probably would have meant charging 10 times what I was charging for it, so bringing it up closer to the £500 for the day, or to offer an upsell to workshop attendees for my one-to-one sales coaching. And I would only have needed, say, 2 people from each workshop to decide to invest £1,500 each in having some ongoing support from me, and those workshops would have suddenly become a profit-making activity. So I struggled with that. I'd say a good 6 months or more of running these workshops, and just total confusion about why this wasn't turning itself into any sort of a financially sustainable business. So like I said, if you're struggling with this too, it's not just you. Like me, you just don't know what you didn't know. The next thing I did wrong, you might laugh at me for this one, but I grew my mailing list for a whole year and didn't send them a single email. So I had done some things right. I'd created a free giveaway for my website. At first it was called 10 Top Tips to Successful Sales Conversations. Then about 6 months later I improved that. I recorded a video series and it became what it is today, which is the 7 Steps to Yes for Authentic Sales Conversations. So for my first full year in business, I was running workshops, I was giving talks, speaking engagements, I was being invited to be interviewed on podcasts. Just to link back to point 1, all of this was happening because I now had a clear message and positioning. It was clear what the problem was that I solved for people, and that captured the imagination of people who wanted to introduce me to their community. So I would get invited to speak, or I'd get invited to be interviewed, or I'd be invited to run a webinar. So over this 12-month period, my emailing list grew to the grand total of 300 people, and not one single one of them heard from me again beyond that initial interview series. I didn't email them to send them anything of value. I didn't email them to nurture them and keep in touch. And I most definitely did not email them to make any offers or invitations to work with me. So, sounds crazy now, but the truth is, I was too scared to email them. And I know some of you will relate to this. I was terrified of the sort of exposure, the vulnerability that I felt sending that email out. And I remember the first day that I emailed that list of about 300 people, it was actually one of, if I look back at my business, my sort of business life, there are these key moments that were the most terrifying moments of all. And that was one of the most knee-knocking moments of my whole business journey, the day that I wrote the email to my entire mailing list and hit send. And you can imagine my relief when I started getting replies back from people telling them how pleased they were to hear from me and how useful they were finding it. And that was the beginning of me starting to send out, at first, intermittent content, which then became more regular content, and today has settled down into being weekly content. But it took me a few years to get weekly content into my routine. So again, if you're not emailing your list as often as you should be, but you know that it's important to do that, don't be too hard on yourself. We all start off with these same challenges. The next thing that I did wrong was that I didn't hire a PA or an assistant in my business, or get any help organising the behind the scenes like my accounts and my admin. I didn't get any help with any of that until it was too late. I did have a virtual assistant right from very early on, but I didn't feel I could afford to put much money into it, so she just used to help me with processing emails, and it wasn't a huge job. And what happened was that in early 2013, I'd been working with some really great business mentors and getting some great advice. that, coupled with my sales experience and the fact that I didn't have any negative stuff or stories or mind gremlins around sales or inviting people to buy from me, meant that I started to get help with the what I don't know bit of business, and I started to really see things happening. So I'd launched my first online program. I then did my first joint venture launch. I ran my first live event. I launched my first mentoring program. I had so much going on, and what happened was that the business grew too quickly and I couldn't keep up at the back end. And what I ended up was that the back end of my business was in absolute chaos. There was nobody to do it properly. There was no systems, there was no procedures. Everything took far longer than it should have done, and it definitely led to me doing far too much work in those first few years. Definitely led to me burning out, and I would say without a doubt the chaos behind the scenes that wasn't visible from the front end definitely set me back in terms of my business growth and what I could have achieved in that time. So my message to you there would be, as soon as you see the green shoots in your business, start to invest some money into getting support and making sure you get those systems and processes in place nice and early so that it doesn't run out of control with you. And then the final thing that I did wrong that I want to share today, there are lots more things, by the way, these are just 5, I could have gone on for hours. But the other thing was that I was just in too much of a hurry to achieve what I would have called, in quotes, success. And being in too much of a hurry actually slowed me down in achieving the really big vision that I'm most excited about. So in early 2013, only 6 months after launching my first online program, I launched my first high-end mentoring program, which I continued to run for the next several years. And the reason I did this was because my business mentors at the time told me that this was the way to create a successful business. And it did work. It was launching that mentoring program that catapulted me very quickly into the 6-figure income bracket, the 6-figure business turnover. And it could have been a perfect business model. For somebody else it would have been. But the problem is that for me, where my heart really was, if anyone had taken the trouble to ask me or to get me to really search within myself, was that my really big calling was to reach many, many more people on a global basis. I wanted to get out there and reach many more people with my online program to get more clients saying yes course. And what happened was that by implementing this high-level program very early on, it took me very quickly to a high turnover. So of course my ego is satisfied, I'd achieved success in quotes, but this wasn't my own dream business model. And the fact that it took so much time and energy and effort to run this high-level program, which I did enjoy running, I did love it, I did enjoy it, but the amount of investment of time and energy it took to run it meant that I didn't have time to do the things that I really wanted to do to actually reach more people with that online program, and now with the new membership community that I'm developing, which I feel even more passionate about. And I can see now, looking back, that if I had been willing to be more patient from the beginning and had been willing to let things evolve more slowly, I would have achieved my bigger vision that was closer to my heart a lot sooner. So if I'd been willing to take things slower, I would have achieved that sooner than I did, if that makes sense. So although and I guess like so many small business owners, I was too busy rushing to achieve this elusive success without realizing that what I was achieving was success, but it was actually someone else's definition of success and not mine, because I had a different dream. And actually I said that was the final point, but I had planned for another point. The final place where I went wrong was I tried to focus on too many things at once. So in my first, full not full year, but in 2013, I guess, which was the first year that I hit the six-figure turnovers, I did my first joint venture launch of my online program. I ran my first live event. I launched my first mentoring program. I started a second mentoring program because the first one sold out. I ran 2 more live events. I created 2 new online programs, Selling from Speaking and Webinar Success Blueprint. It was like I was so desperate to bring all these creations into reality that I wanted to do all of them all at once. And the end result was that by the end of 2013, I was completely burned out. I made a lot less progress in 2014 because of that, because I had to slow up and recover my energy. And I think because it felt like a race for me to get all these ideas done and created and completed, in the long run, that rush to get to try and implement everything at once actually slowed me down. And I wish I had known then what I know now, which is that I'm in this for the long haul. And if I don't get that new program created this year, or I don't get that evergreen funnel set up this year, that's okay. I'm still going to be here next year, and I'm still going to be here the year after, and the business is still running, the business is still working perfectly well without those things. And I am much, much better nowadays at knowing what the highest priority outcome is that I'm working towards, and what the highest priority thing is that I need to be focusing on right now to move me towards that outcome. And I'm much better at being okay to put everything else on the back burner, no matter how shiny and exciting they might be, because I'm focused on the thing that is the most important for me to achieve that long-term vision. So, of course, eventually I did start doing everything right. Well, I don't say everything. I'm sure I still don't do everything right. And not only have a successful business, but I've had a business that has consistently turned over 6 figures year on year for the last 5 years. But in addition to that, I have helped literally hundreds of heart-centered business owners to start to grow businesses that are really working for them and that are in flow for them and that they can be in love with. In short, I've helped them to shortcut some of the what they don't know. So if you would like my help and guidance with the what you don't know part of running a business, I would love to help you with that. Or maybe you'd like help getting really clear on your vision so that you don't get sidetracked on a business model that isn't taking you in the right direction. Or perhaps you just want help staying focused on those things that are, the highest priority for you to achieve that vision. Then I'd love to support you with that. I'm actually going to be launching my Business from the Heart membership community within the next few weeks. It's currently in beta. We've had 114 members going through it since January, sort of testing it and giving me feedback and helping me to create it. But later on this month, I'm going to be launching it officially, and it's a great way for you to get the same sort of support that I used to offer to those high-end mentoring clients, but for a very low monthly investment. So if that feels right for you, keep an eye out for that. Within the next few weeks, you'll be starting to see emails and more information coming through about that, and I would love to have you join me for that. So I hope this has been useful for you today. Do come and share in the comments if it has. And just remember, I just want to go back to what I said at the beginning. If you feel like you're operating from within a bank of fog at the moment and you keep doing things that are not quite working for you, this does not mean that you are not an intelligent and capable person. This does not mean that you are not cut out to be in business. All it means is that there are things that you don't know yet. You just don't know what you don't know, just like I didn't, which is why I made those mistakes. So I hope you've enjoyed this today. Do let me know, and lots of love to you. And the next time you see me on video, I will be back in the UK.